everyone. Welcome to the Pens and the Bookmarks, an edutainment roundtable where both the readers and the writers weigh in on all things bookish. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who knows? Who cares? We'll be bringing our drinks, but leaving the drama. I'm A.E. Kincaid, and I'm a fantasy author and mom to a hilarious 6-year-old who loves a good story about dragons.
I am Kimberly Grimes, and I am a YA multi-genre author. And I have 3 very energetic girls, 20, 15, and 11, I think. One does not read, one likes to read, and one loves to read.
I'm Whitney Hugh, and I have 3 kiddos who are just like me, and they all love to read. They are 8, 9, and 11, and have extremely varying tastes.
I'm Megan J. Dahl, and I am a fantasy author and mom to a 15-year-old son who loves a good fantasy tome. So,
I'm Lou Becker. I'm an avid reader. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and twin 8-year-old boys who are more than happy to fall into a fantasy world or follow the city spies in their next adventure.
So this week, in case you were wondering, we're talking about raising readers. As all of us are parents, we thought this was a pretty important topic to tackle, and we're all wondering, can it be done on purpose? We'll be puzzling that out. But first, we have some news, and the biggest news of the day is that it's Megan's birthday.
Yay!
Yay! Happy birthday, Megan. Thank you for making time on this day to hang with us and do this recording.
it is my pleasure to hang out with all of you today.
I know that Kimberly has some news. Do you want to share that?
Sure. I recently finished up a series doing a soft release for book 2 in my YA science fantasy duology series. It's Faunus, and it is out. So I was really excited about that. I did learn that doing a book release over the summer is a bit chaotic since there's a lot going on with family and everything. So that's why I kind of lean towards just a soft release. I also, for my YA dark fantasy coming out in the fall, I booked an audiobook narrator, which might not sound like a big deal, but finding that right voice and in your budget, and it's just a process. So for me, I was just very, very elated to find somebody who not only committed to book 1, but books 2 and 3.
That's awesome. And you're so right, because like I would like David Tennant to do an eventual audiobook for me. It's possible though, he's out of my budget.
We sort of GoFundMe.
That's right. That's right.
Our favorites are our favorites for a reason.
If he gets enough attention, I bet he'd do it.
I was going to say also possibly out of my sphere of influence. No, that's awesome, Kimberly. Good for you.
Dream big. Dream big.
Dream big. Yes, that's right. Does anybody else, Whitney, do you have any?
I wish I had news. My only news is we've survived being out of school for a few weeks so far. So
Yay. Nice.
That is big news.
How about you, Megan?
I'm chugging along with, I've actually, I suppose as news goes, I'm making progress.
Yay!
Yay! Pretty big news. I'm not the fastest writer, as everyone knows. So, but I'm cooking with gas now.
Hey.
Nice.
Oh,
That's awesome. How about you, Lou? Costco trip.
Costco trip. Hour drive.
Semi-annual Costco trip.
Annual. My friend that I went with goes monthly. She is a brave, brave woman.
Wow.
We are anxiously awaiting the 2 more weeks till the one that is half an hour closer to us actually opens. That Costco trip. We are in our last week of school, actually. So we are done with full school this week. And then my older 2 kids actually have a couple of things they'll finish up over like homeschool, summer school. So we're almost there.
Nice.
Almost.
For you.
My news, which I completely forgot about, thank you, Kimberly, for reminding me, is that I revealed the title of the last book in my series last week. It is The Demon. So the series that I write, they all start with the demon, the hero, and whatever. This is The Demon, the Hero, and the War for Widdershins. So, stay tuned.
Super excited to see the cover. I can't wait.
I am too. Yes, she is not starting till August, so it's not like I'm holding out on anybody. Like I have not. We don't have one, but we will. She's amazing. It's going to be great. I just know it. Okay, next up, what are we all reading right now, Kimberly?
Yes, I am still reading Hellbent. Has anybody read Hellbent or listened to it? Oh, okay. So I've made really great progress with it, and I'm at the gauntlet scene. So
Ooh,
I'm trucking along. I'm getting to the good stuff, and I'm
it's right up
really,
from here. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm making progress. I'm hoping by the next time we record, this won't be on my current reads. But yes, I believe they say it's YA, but I really don't recommend this series to YA. I don't know. Somebody said it was YA, but I don't know. It's a very graphic book series. Some details. I don't know if I'd have my teen read it. And I am reading Lovely, Dark, and Deep, courtesy of Lou.
Yay!
I have only started a few chapters in, and I love it, and I can't wait to see where it goes. But I am just devouring The Demon, the Hero, and the City of Seven so I had gotten this book, and I was like, I'm going to read it. 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 And I just never got around to it. And so then finally one night I was like, I'm just going to do it, and literally started reading it. And I was like, who is this woman? I thought I knew. Like, there were things in this. If you guys have not checked out this story, I was like, this is not what I was expecting. It's very funny, but it's not like comedic funny. It's just like realistic situations that unfortunate events that happen, and the characters are just like, I'm probably dating myself here, but like Odd Couple. It's just so funny as they go along, and just there's language and situations, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like wanting more, and I'm like, I am loving Mal. I love Reg's innocence, and how Mal just goes in and he just pokes at that constantly. I'm like, I mean, I know we're not supposed to talk about the inn, but oh my God, I was like, can we just keep talking about the inn? So, yes, it's not what I was expecting. And your writing style it's just a quick pace. And I love how the chapters just move along. And at the end of each chapter, I'm just hooked to read more. So I'm so mad at myself for holding off on reading this for so long. So,
well, thank you. That is very,
yes.
very, what a lovely review.
Yeah, so I'm
Read
definitely
Amy's
mad
book,
at myself.
everybody.
Seriously, I don't know why. Like, I think were people comparing it to Legends and Lattes, and I haven't read that, but
Yeah.
comparing it to this humorous, funny, like cartoonish, like it's going to be fun. And then I started reading. I was like, oh, this is not PG-13.
No.
They're like, what, 2 pages in? I didn't know you shocked me.
Were you like, oh my gosh, I did not know this side of Amy.
This is how I met Amy.
I was gonna say, this is how we met. So
You only knew that side of Amy.
So imagine how my parents feel having read these books.
Yeah, they were probably like, well, we did not know this side of Amy either.
Yeah, no.
Well, no, I highly recommend, because it's definitely a hoot to read, and I am freaking loving it. And now I'm deep in Widdershins. So That is where I am. Hopefully Hellbent won't be there.
Well, lovely. I'm so glad you're enjoying the things that you are reading. Whitney, right? Yeah, Whitney.
Yay. Okay, so I will talk about Dawn first. I have recently decided to do some old school science fiction, and Octavia Butler is one of those, and Ursula K. Le Guin is one of the others that I've been reading. So I've been picking up some novellas. I've read Kindred by Octavia Butler, and so I just grabbed this off the shelf in this new local indie bookstore without reading the back. I just was like, I'm going for Butler, and I grabbed it. And then I found out it was part of a series, which I didn't even know until I started. It's so good. I like her writing is so accessible for people who are like, oh, science fiction is too sciencey or it's like too heady or whatever. And it's just not true about Butler's writing. It's just so good. So I am devouring it. I'm about to pick up a new buddy read this afternoon, so I might not read any more of it today, but I am highly enjoying it. It's kind of post-apocalyptic. The Earth has basically, humans have all destroyed each other in war, basically, is where we started. So they have been rescued by an extraterrestrial race, has taken as many still living humans as they can, and they have put them to a restful sleep for 250 years while the Earth sort of repairs itself. And then they are trying to equip them to go back to start a human race.
Oh, interesting.
It's really interesting. Or else I'm just a super nerd, but I feel like I'm in good company here. So y'all are welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next two at the bottom. So this is book 3 and 4 of the Bridge Kingdom series. And I put them both because I just finished The Inadequate Heir last night when we were preparing for this, and I will read The Endless War in the next day or two. But basically, books 1 and 2, 1 ends on a cliffhanger, and 2 picks up right where that leaves off. But they kind of are about 2 characters, the first 2 books. And so these 3 and 4 are about 2 other characters. But this is where it gets interesting, and we can talk about this later when we touch on series more. But book 3 and book 2 are happening at the same time. So I already knew some of the outcome of what was going to happen in The Inadequate Heir, but what they've done is I'm seeing it from a totally different perspective because I'm following 2 different characters in the same conflict. It was awesome. And her writing is nonstop. There is just thing after thing after thing. It's excellent. My only complaint is that basically the only way to get it is Amazon, Audible, KU, whatever, because that's how she published. And I know that you guys make choices that you got to make to get your books out into the world. And I just am so sad because I wanted to hold them in my hands, and I don't do KU. And so I had to subscribe to Audible for the month so that I could listen to them. So anyways, I really went over some hurdles to get these books, but I'm really glad I did. And it sounds like the next ones are coming out soon, but because we kind of tie a bow on 2 books at a time, it seems like the wait is not going to be excruciating for the next 2 to come out. But I will probably wait until 5 and 6 are out to pick up 5 because
yes, because
cliffhanger thing is real.
I was gonna say because the cliffhanger. So I haven't finished The Inadequate Heir yet, but I know between 1 and 2 the cliffhanger was rough. And I'm assuming there's another one here, and there would be 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you're enjoying these because I tend to gravitate towards complete universe stories,
Yes.
So the same general world, but different parts of that same world, telling like different stories and things. So I've been really interested to read these. So I'm glad to hear you're enjoying them.
Yeah.
Are they YA romance fantasy, or just like, I mean, I'm assuming they're romance.
There is some romance. The first ones were like enemies to lovers.
Mhm.
This set is basically still enemies to lovers. But I don't feel like the romance is the main. There's a lot of like kingdom politics. There's like these 3 kingdoms that are, and everybody's killing each other. There's been this war for a long, like everybody's just, they hate each other. And so there's a lot of like, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Are they killing for a good reason or a bad reason? Like, who do we pull for? Because each of these characters is like somebody that you want to support. They're pretty violent, and the romance has some spice, and it's not no spice. I don't know. I'm hesitant to say YA, but I would say new adult, maybe.
I think initially when the Bridge Kingdom came out, I think they were originally like sold as YA books, but they're really more new adult.
I would like, I'm careful with what I say as YA and like what I would actually recommend to a teenager. So I would have to know the teenager before I recommended these, but they are extremely good.
Cool.
Good to know. Oh, that's me.
Megan, what are you reading?
Yeah, so I've been deep in my writing, so I've just got one this time. I'm listening to Manners and Monsters by Tilly Willis. So I just happened to find this in my Kobo listening recommendations, and it's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. It's very genteel though, so. And I'm enjoying it. So if you are wondering how you can do Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and still make it kind of genteel, you'll have to read it to find out.
No spoilers
I love
here,
Pride
guys.
and Prejudice and Zombies.
That's amazing.
Speaking of fashion, I can't wait for this fashion to come back.
Yeah.
Right. I know. Although Peplum is supposed to be coming this fall. So
There we go.
Ooh.
yeah,
Okay.
that'll be fun.
Yeah, I will pass on the corset.
Yeah.
Lou, what are you reading these days? So many things.
So many things. I'm gonna make up for Megan. Well, I am still reading The City of Brass. Kimberly, I feel a little bit like you here because I think I started this like 6 years ago. I am officially less than 200 pages to the end of the book, so I'm well over halfway now. And it's great. It's lovely. I like her writing is gorgeous. The world building is beautiful. It's just one of those books. Like, I don't know, the pace is a little slower, and it's just so much to absorb that I just find myself like not moving super quickly through it. And I get super into it when I read it, and then I put it down and I'm like, okay. And then I'm like half inclined to pick up anything else. So it's, again, I'm enjoying it. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's the season for me. I'm not totally hooked, but I am going to finish it. That's coming. A Daughter of Trolls. This is one that I don't even remember how. I think I saw the cover on Instagram and probably was completely influenced to grab this.
It's really pretty.
It's gorgeous.
It's a gorgeous cover.
And it is super cool. Disabled main character in a wheelchair. The author is disabled, and I think she calls it an alternative like model. So she is also in a wheelchair, but she like does cosplay and modeling, and so it's super cool to have her like perspective. You can kind of see it come out in the character, and so there's a lot of sense of like the character, like real difficulties she's facing in this fantasy story, and also at the same time like her sense of like, I'm not incomplete, like as I am, and I'm super capable. Like they're literally going on a quest. The main character in this one, her mom They call her the troll daughter, and she cares for this glen of magical creatures. Essentially, it's her job to keep it safe. There are evil witches out in the forest, and they feed on magic. And so, like, every night, one of their duties is to make the salt circle all the way around the village so the witches can't get in. Our story begins with there was a gap in the salt circle. And so it's our main character and her childhood friend, Rush, who is a half goblin. And both of their families are taken by Black Annis, the witch. And so they are going off on this quest to see if they can kill the witch, free their families, like save the glade. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it a whole lot. It's beautiful.
Is it a standalone?
Yes. Yeah.
Standalone fantasy sometimes when I can't commit to a huge thing.
Same. Yeah. So yes, I love it. Do recommend.
Wait, so that turns you off from reading a standalone fantasy?
No, I mean, I'm saying like sometimes I'm ready to just get a 8-book series and go with it. Sometimes I just want the one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice because I am in the middle of several other series, so it's a fun one to kind of just like, it's just going to be its own thing.
Yeah.
So speaking of series, To Swoon and to Spar is the latest Martha Waters book that's out. I freaking love this series. If y'all love rom-coms and period rom-coms at all, I like 12 out of 10 recommend her. I got into book 1 to Happen to Hoax accidentally because it's literally about a couple, a married couple, the main characters who are estranged, and they are essentially like outdoing each other in like these like mean pranks. And so she literally like
It's so excellent.
She spends the book trying to convince her estranged husband that she is dying of like consumption.
I think so.
And it's like this whole elaborate thing. And of course they fall back in love. And so it's like always like these huge, like ridiculous scenarios. They're not pretending like this is like real everyday life for most people. To Swoon and to Spar is the 4th. This is the brother of one of the main characters from an earlier book. And he's a Viscount who's been wanting to get his land back, or his his home back. He lost it. He became a Viscount as a child. His uncle swept in and bought the estate. His uncle presents him the opportunity to buy the estate at this point in his life on the contingency that he marry his uncle's ward, who he's never met. He agrees. They meet. They don't really like each other. They get married. They agree this is not going to be a love match. They're just going to do it. She can stay out of London, which she hates, and doesn't have to have a season. He can have his house. Everybody wins. After they get married, the uncle comes in and has a little sit down and is like, by the way, the estate's haunted. Like,
Oh no.
P.S.
Yes, which you know from the back of the book is her doing. So she and one of her ladies' maids have been haunting the estate to drive off the uncle so that she can just stay there by herself. And so, of course, now her plan is to continue that so that maybe her husband will just go live in London and leave her to her library in the country. They're funny. They're super funny. They're really sweet. They're open door, but not graphic. I mean, they're just like, they're awesome little summer reads. I love them. And then last one is my nonfiction read, because I'm in a weird nonfiction stint right now. But I picked this one up as an impulse buy, and I absolutely love it. It's Introverted Mom by Jamie C. Martin. And it literally is just like her kind of talking about like learning she was an introvert, like, and coming to terms with the fact that like, that's okay. And there's like a space for her in the world, and there's a space for her as a mom. And then also saying like, on the flip side of that, when you're an introvert and a mom and you have your days full of people who need you all the time, that can be super draining. And so just presenting some like opportunities where she even had like a little practical section that I've really loved. I like bookmarked it because it was like, if you have 15 minutes, here's like 3 pages of ideas of like things that might like fuel you. Like if you have half an hour, if you have like 90 minutes, if you have hours or a day, like, and just like ideas for like, okay, here are things that maybe would like just help you think of it, which I feel like sometimes as an introvert can be hard to be like, I need a minute, but I'm so overwhelmed. I can't even like think about what would make me feel better right now, except to like hide under my covers for the next like half hour, which is, I think, one of the options. But so yeah, so it's good. I'm really enjoying that one as well.
I mean, whatever, the other day you posted something like a little blip from one page, and I was like, what book is that? I apparently need it.
I completely recommend it. It's lovely. Like it's been so good. I've highlighted it and like it's like tabbed everywhere, and like I haven't loved. Yeah, do recommend.
That's awesome, because you're right. Yeah, like it can just be, I don't know. Just like my husband asked me yesterday. He was like, "What can I do to help you?" I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been like, I feel like it's like, yeah, it's been super nice, because she just like, she even like goes through a couple of times and says like, these are things that could trigger you, like that are like drains, like, and it's like the kid who comes in and is like, what's for breakfast, what's for lunch, what's for like, and I was like, and I have that kid, and I have to be like, every morning, I love you, but it is stressful for me when the first words out of your mouth are, what's for breakfast? Like, we have never not fed you breakfast.
Morning is a good start.
I need us to ease into that moment. Like, but it just was like hearing another mom like say, okay, this is a specific thing that like can like trigger you as an introvert to be like, wait, why are we overloading with questions right this second? Or like, it just has been really affirming. I'm like, I am not crazy that this is stressful to me. This is hard.
Yeah. So everybody, all those introverted moms out there, parents in general, check it out. Good advice. I am just reading the one book right now because it's like 1,000,000 pages long. Every book is like 800 pages, which is not, and there's like 9 of them. And then there's novellas, and I don't know. So, but it's good. This is, I think it's Abaddon's Gate. I think that's how you say that. It's the 3rd book in the Expanse series. I watched the show. I absolutely adored the show. I am reading this. I knew as soon as I started watching the show that I eventually wanted to read the books. They jumped the queue a little bit. Somebody I know who was talking about them and saying how it was like, it's almost like the show and the books complement each other. And I feel like that's a great portrayal of like Hallie's work. The books themselves are so detailed, like just so impressively detailed. And usually I actually don't enjoy books that get like really bogged down in details. There's in the 2nd book, there was like a full page summary of like how they move a box from one ship to another in like half G or something like that. I don't know. It was like a lot, but it's also super fascinating because I know how much research went into making sure that was as accurate as possible. So yeah, anyway, I'm really enjoying it. The story is really interesting. It's cool knowing what happens sort of, because of the show. I don't feel as like desperate to finish, if that makes sense. I can just kind of like slow down and enjoy it unraveling, which it does. Yeah, but that's what I'm reading right now. And then like Megan, I am actually wrote the first chapter of a new book over the weekend. So yeah, excited about that.
Wait, a new book or book 3?
Yeah, a new book. Yeah, still Witterson's universe, but not Malin Ridge. So yeah, stay tuned. Yeah, YA, but like actual YA. Real YA.
True YA.
Recommend to a YA person.
That's so hard. I mean, because I write YA and it's like, yeah, it's hard to write where's the line, especially when you're comparing to some other YA authors and what they put in the books. And I'm like, well, they put it in the book, so I can put it in the book.
I know.
So
I know. I just gotta use my compass, my internal compass, I guess. Well, also because you're so surprised at my series, like having swears and like situations and whatever. Like I want to steer clear of that, make it something that I could potentially let Clark read at some point in the future. Yeah. Anyway, we are here to talk about raising readers. Who will hopefully love all of those books that we are reading, that we just talked about, that we're reading someday in the future. But the first question I have for everyone is, how did we become readers? Did our parents have strategies, do we think? Or like, did it just happened, our natural inclinations?
So I guess I can start. I think I'm not sure if my parents had a strategy per se, more that they just bundled us along with everything they were doing. So we went to the library every week, and there wasn't quite as much digital distraction at that time. But my parents did read to me. From a young age, they read to me, and my father would actually tell me stories, Pinky stories, with the so the hero was is Pinky, but so people on YouTube can see me gesturing, but but he would sort of mangle fairy tales with Pinky, so it would be Pink and Boots or that kind of thing. And so that generated a love of story, and then we went from there into books. But yeah, I was brought to the library every week and let loose in the in a fairly large library, and yeah, eventually it took. I found something I liked.
How about you, Lou?
I was going to say I'm kind of similar. I definitely partially intentional. My grandma had her secondary degree in early childhood literacy. And my mom was a primary school teacher. So reading and being around a ton of books was super important to them. So it was for me, we would go stay the week at grandma's house, and day one and we go to the library, and it was like this magical thing. Like we got to go to a whole new library in a whole new city, and pack up all these books for the week. And my parents read to us. My dad, especially, I remember reading The Hobbit. It was our winter tradition. And so even like when the films, like in the Lord of the Rings films all came out, like for me, even as like an older, like I was, I think, a high schooler when those started coming out, like I was terrified of Gollum and totally cool with the ring wraiths. To us as a kid, and he did the voices, and it was just ingrained. Like Gollum was the scariest thing I could think of. Like we spent a lot of time doing that, and I think too, just naturally like a little more inclined that way. But we spent a ton of time around books. My parents bought us as many books as they could. We went to the library. My grandparents were the same way. And so just I think a lot of exposure to words and to loving words. And yeah.
How about you, Kimberly?
I was not a reader as a child. I don't recall a lot of influence besides what the school said, read Beowulf, and I didn't like English class. I have ADHD when it comes to and a learning disability in just retaining grammar. It's just a foreign language to me. Yes, I am an author. But and I know this is, I don't know if it's a cliche or not, but it was Twilight. I was in my early 30s, I think. and Twilight had already come out,
Mhm.
and somebody was buying it in Target. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try reading. I was not a reader. I love movies, TV, anything. And so I tried Twilight, and I was instantly hooked. There's something about YA fiction that's easier for my brain to follow along.
Mhm.
For adult fiction, there's so much information that I just get lost and distracted very easily. So for YA fiction, it just moved so fast, and the characters were just very well developed and everything. And so from there, I went to Cassandra Clare, and I did audiobooks, and I mean, I was devouring these books as fast as I could. These series are the Arcana Chronicles, The Poison Princess, one of my favorite ones. So it was literally just something later in my life that took to me. And then from there, I decided I want to tell these stories that I have in my head. And even though I'm not the best at grammar, I have an amazing support team, critique partners, editors, and I've learned over the years how to, kind of retain some of this stuff. But yeah, it's kind of later in life for me. And now it's very big for me with my kids. I want to make sure that they're reading what they want to read, at least to get some interest, because I don't want to force Beowulf or something on them if they don't want to read Beowulf. So.
Yeah, I think that's a fair strategy, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we're doing it with our kids in a bit. But like, no shade to whatever got you into reading, like, and I mean that's not just for Kimberly, like just across the board, like whatever got you into it, welcome.
We're happy you're here.
It's an amazing community, and I really feel like that should be incentive enough for people to just start reading. That is my 20-year-old who I've been trying to get to read more.
Cameo.
But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, however you can get into it, especially the community, is everybody is just so amazing.
How about you, Whitney? Do you think your parents had a strategy for you?
I don't know. The only thing I can ever remember my dad reading is the newspaper, or something work related. And then my mom was always reading something. We have shelves of Stephen King, and I can remember as a teenager her reading the Outlander books as they came out.
Mhm.
That was like a huge, for some reason, those are the books that I remember her like, oh, it's Outlander Day, I have to go pick up the new book. And then we just wouldn't see her for like 48 hours. Like, I highly relate with that. But I don't know if it's just me, but I don't have a ton of memories from the first few years of my life. Like all of my memories that I can remember are when my brother was born and later. So I basically remember her reading to him. So I'm assuming that she also read to me. And I know she did. She loves to read to my children when we're together. But the biggest thing I can think of is that, like, I sort of had no parents. Like, they were like, no, you don't need ice cream. No, you don't need that. Like, we're not going to go buy you a toy. But my mom would always say yes to a book. And I was a book hoarder from a very young age.
It was in that sentences.
But I think just that there was always something available for me to read. And if I didn't like it after the first couple chapters, I put it down and picked something else. And I remember when I graduated from Goosebumps into like older kind of like scary books, like whatever. And I remember being old enough for my mom to choose my first Stephen King read that she was like, this one is okay for you at this age. Like, I was like, I've graduated to like adult scary books. But just that there was always something around, like the availability of it. And that's something I've built into my house with my kids now too.
I think the availability is a big thing. I don't know. I'm not sure that my parents had like a real strategy exactly. I don't think they thought of it that way. I think they just sort of assumed that we would like to read because they did, or something. I don't know. I think it was just like the thing that they did. So I know my parents, my mom especially, like read to me before bed, and I had the Fisher Price. I'm super old. I had the Fisher Price record player that you could put on, and you could like read Frog and Toad, and it would like do the ding, and like that's when you turn the page. And so I had that, and we had books at home, and we went to the library a lot. And I mean, I used to read 100 books a summer. Like no school had to give me a reading list. Like it was just something that I loved. And when I was much younger, before I could read myself, my brother's 6 years older than I am, and he was really into the Lord of the Rings. And so we used to listen like to the BBC radio broadcast version of it, and we'd like pretend to be in the Lord of the Rings. And I think that gave me sort of like a foundational love of fantasy. But just, I don't know, just like exposure. I just saw how cool stories were, and there wasn't as much TV. I mean, we had like 3 channels growing up. So it's not like I was like sitting in front of reading, watching a lot of TV. My opportunity to get into stories was books. So, speaking of those kinds of books, though, what was the first like books or series that got you hooked on reading? We talked about Kimberly's
Twilight. Yep.
Yeah.
So my first series was Sweet Valley Twins by Francine Pascal. I think I was about 7 years old, and I discovered those at the library, and that was like binge reading from there on.
And there were so many.
There were many. And then I could move into Sweet Valley High, which oddly enough I didn't get as into, because by the time I was old enough to be a bit more interested in Sweet Valley High, I was starting to read adult things, and just they let you loose in the library, and they let you have whatever you want. So
true.
Whatever.
What about you, Lou?
So I think series-wise, when I was a kid, Nancy Drew. My library had like this completely mismatched, like huge, like collection, and I read every single one they had when I was in the 4th grade. And then Babysitter's Club.
Yes,
was another one. Yeah, that I think I read. Yeah, like, and again, there were kind of like a million of them. I don't retain a lot of anything from the Babysitter's Club, but I loved them as a kid. So yeah, for sure.
Whitney?
I mentioned Goosebumps. That was, and Nancy Drew, like Lou said, those are really big for me. I remember ones that I had to read for school, which is interesting that those are the ones that are sticking out to me. I can't remember like what I just chose to do in the summer when I was really young, but we read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 4th grade. And I was just done for. Like it was like fantasy is my thing. So I loved that. We also read A Wrinkle in Time that same year. I mean, it was just like brain explosion. But I also really liked who wrote The Mouse and the Motorcycle? Beverly Cleary.
Yeah.
Right. I read a bunch of those. I read a lot of Roald Dahl. So not necessarily like sequential series, but like types of books. I liked those a lot. And then, I mean, when Harry Potter started coming out, I read them until the covers fell off. So yeah, that was probably what carried me through. I don't remember reading much for pleasure in high school or college, except in the summers. But I got into like light romance. I didn't read Twilight until I was an adult either. I was older too, Kimberly. I know a lot of friends who read them as they were coming out, and I was like, I don't need vampires. I was like, whoo, I needed vampires. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's important. Like, I mean, how do you raise readers? Well, how were we raised? Like, what was important to us? I read all the Babysitters Club and the Sweet Valley and all the Sweet Valley Highs. So like I was really into fantasy, so I read all the Earthsea books. Super into that. Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea, and The Hobbit was I didn't read The Lord of the Rings on my own until much later, but in third grade I read The Hobbit. But the book that like I talk about all the time that I like cannot get out of my brain and holds up like even as an adult is called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg. And I will bring that up. I will find a way to bring that book up. Like it's such a special, tiny little book. And I think that is the book that just made solidly made me a reader. Like I read that and I read a bunch of other stuff by her. And, but that is the book that's just like, I keep coming back to, and I have brought Clark into, and like, I just, my A.E. Kincaid is the last name of the kids in that book.
Love that.
Yeah.
Kincaid's a pen name?
Yeah. My last name is Mertz.
Oh, that's right. I knew that. Hey. I knew that.
Yeah. Which is not any kind of secret. It just, Kincaid is just more authory. So that's the one for me, I think. Okay. So transitioning over to our children. If your child is a reader now, what was their first book or series that got them hooked on reading? And I think we'll have some varied answers here.
So my son, I read to him from when he was very tiny, and I always read to him. But I was struggling to get him to read on his own. Like he really wanted me to read to him, but he didn't want to pick up the books himself. And so I just kept reading to him. He was 10 or 11 years old before he really took off with reading. And but he loved Wings of Fire.
Oh, I just bought that.
So we read that. We enjoyed that because I enjoyed reading it, which helps a lot. And then he liked it so much he had to reread it immediately himself.
Oh, that's nice.
But he also enjoyed the Magic Treehouse series. He started reading some of those by himself. But yeah, it was really Wings of Fire that really sort of sent him off into, I read everything. I got to find all the good stuff now.
Megan, did you read the graphic novels or the novels?
The novels. The graphic novels didn't exist yet, so we read the original novels. And
I wasn't sure how long ago that was. My son, my elder two, really like the graphic novels, and I didn't want to cut you off, but we love those. They're like super fun. Highly recommend for kids and adults of all ages.
Agreed.
Now I have to see if my library has the graphic novels because I just bought the novels.
The first 6, only the first 6 are out.
Yeah,
I know
all out.
That is what hooked my 8-year-olds. So you were talking about like your son being older. So my twins are in 2nd grade this year. And that's kind of where they are. Like one of them is pretty like fluent on his own. We read aloud all the time. But they love listening to stories, but the two of them kind of like the one is really fluent, but just not super interested. The other one, he can read. He just doesn't believe he can read. So getting him to do it on his own has been really difficult. And it was the Wings of Fire graphic novels that just clicked for him. And he went down and read everyone in like a day and a half. And he would be like, Mom, can we get the next one? Like, can we get the next one? And then my other, like his brother was like, wait, what are you reading? So now they carry them everywhere. And They've read them. He's on his second read through of the whole series. So he like took a break and he read this other series called Mia Mayhem, which is a really fun short chapter like book series. And now he is back to rereading his way through the Wings of Fire again. So yeah, agree with both of y'all. That's a huge one. I would say my oldest son, for him, it was probably Percy Jackson.
Mm.
And we listen to those as a family. We do in the car, we do audio books, especially for longer road trips. So we get a new book every time we go on a long road trip. And so then everybody's excited to go listen for however many hours we'll be in the car.
Yep.
So we worked our way through the Percy Jackson series as a family, and that was a huge one for him. And my daughter, I think probably early on would have been Magic Tree House, but then later for her was Keeper of the Lost Cities. And that was the one that I think just really fully hooked her. And she became just like, she would read it and reread favorite parts and reread it. And from there into other like fantasy series in middle grade and YA both. But that is her, like she would still say like that's her favorite. And she's 15, but she's, yeah, absolutely. We're hooked into that world. So.
How about you, Kimberly? I know you've got some lukewarm reading, some.
My oldest, she doesn't really read. She never really has. She did some, how do you pronounce, Raina? Is it Raina? The graphic novels, Raina, I can't remember her last name, but she did like Smile and
my daughter has those right now.
Yeah, so she devoured all of that series when she was younger, but that's probably the extent of it. Our youngest right now, she got started with Geronimo Stilton books, and she absolutely, I mean, anytime we'd go to the library or anytime she'd get a chance to at school, she would read either the books or the graphic novels or anything. She just really loved that story world. So I thought she'd be interested in fantasy, but as she's getting older, she doesn't really like fantasy books. So she likes more of the contemporary things that have to do with horses or soccer or stories about middle school. So she has been reading a lot more of that, those kind of books. And so we just, take a trip to the library, or she does Kindle. She read a couple of the Babysitter Club books. But I don't think she has a habit of reading and not finishing and then starting another book and then reading. And I'm like, you have to finish these books, especially because in school they get points for finishing books and you take a quiz for AR. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry. And then our 15-year-old, she got hooked on, now she likes to read. She's not a reader, but she got hooked on Maze Runner. And she loved that series. And so then I introduced her to the Mortal Instruments, and she really enjoyed that series. And I think she's on book 3 for that one. But she is a reader where she cannot even pick up another book until she is finished with a series. So, which is good, but at the same time, getting her to finish the series. So, but yes, I have one who likes to read, one who loves to read, and then the oldest is, I don't want to say a lost cause, because I didn't really read until I was later in my 20s, 30s. So I'm hoping down the road she'll get the bug.
Yeah, I was going to say, you never know.
You
when
never know.
It's going to come to you.
You
How
just
about you,
need the right book.
Winnie, you said Wings of Fire is a big one in your house.
Yeah, my older two still lean toward the graphic novels, and that's been kind of interesting to try to like elevate their level a little bit while still keeping in mind that that's their thing that they still really love. I haven't decided whether it's like if they just truly love pictures still and they really want that to be a part of it, or if it's some like it's too intimidating with that many words on the page or what it is. But right now I'm just letting them do it. But we have countless Dogman and Captain Underpants because I have 2 boys. So those are everywhere. My daughter is reading those the same series. When you said Smile, I picture it in my head and I knew what you were talking about. So she read those. She has, she did a couple of the Usborne series when she was younger, just like fairies and unicorns and like all, like when she was a really early reader, she was devouring those like pretty quickly. But my youngest is a nonfiction lover, which has been so confusing to me, but he is my like science brain. He also has ADHD and he will not do something that is not interesting to him.
Mm-hmm.
And when he is not in the mood to read fiction, he just won't do it. And so when I take him to the library, he will get on the nonfiction aisle, and I mean, he can spout more random knowledge than I ever thought possible in a 8-year-old. I mean, it's wild. But that's his preferred thing, is like science books. He will lug around like an encyclopedia of this or that that's like enormous. Just read it cover to cover. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's hard for me to understand because I'm not a nonfiction lover, but I'm like, okay, go for it.
I mean, it's going to serve him well, probably.
I know. I'm like, he's going to be something great because
I love it.
there's so much knowledge in there. But he also just got into Pokemon, and now we're like, oh no, Pokemon is here.
Like a crossover, right? Because it's got like all the stats and stuff like that.
Yes,
You know, but like,
absolutely.
I should say too, I'm going to jump in real fast. I told you, I gave an audiobook for my oldest son but I was like, that's not him reading personally, but he's the same way with, he like was even like when he was little, like, and still to this day, he's my nonfiction kid. He wants to write nonfiction. He wants to read nonfiction. He's like, I mean, there are some stories he gets into, but his preference is almost always going to be history or science or it's like, okay.
We've tried to do some of those, the I Survived books and the Who Was books that read a little more like stories, but are still kind of nonfiction. He's kind of whatever about him, but the other kids like him. So,
my kiddo will read whatever. He's only 6, so he hasn't had like a ton of time to develop his own sense of like what he loves. One of the first series that he adored, and like I cannot blame him, it is hilarious, is the Mr. Pants series by Scott McCormick. If you are not familiar, I beg of you to pick them up. They're so funny. It's like these 3 cats who are also like this woman's children. And they're set up like comics, like graphic novels. And there's 4 books, and they're just like, if you have children and or cats, like you're just going to die.
it just jogged my memory because that's like the silliness kind of sounds like it. My older son loves the Hillo books. They're written by Judd Winnick, who was apparently on The Real World when we were like on MTV. I didn't even know that until later. I like followed him on Instagram once I had a book career because I was like, and he started like posting these Real World throwback stuff, and I was like, oh my god, that's him. I was like, what? But anyways, it's a graphic novel series. But he's like, Hillo is like a boy who saves the world. It's like they're all like kind of sciencey, but graphic novels, they're all really good. So maybe you could look those up for Clark.
Yes, I definitely will. Because it's like anything. So like Captain Underpants, we read all the Captain Underpants. We read all the Droon books. He's on to
so many.
Yeah, there's so many. Oh my gosh. I felt so accomplished. Like I went into the library. I was like, do I get a trophy for finishing these books? So many.
You deserve one.
We just finished up the last Dragon Masters book. And so now like we have to pre-order the next 2. One comes out in August and one comes out in December, because that's ongoing. But yeah, so just dragons in general, but Mr. Pants, guys, very funny. Yeah.
Is it
So,
is it a chapter book or is it like a little like
yeah,
kindergarten book?
technically they're chapters, but like, I mean, there's like what, like 6 pages a chapter, like, and they're graphic novels. So like, you know, there's not a lot of content, but man, I want them to make it into a cartoon series so badly. It's just hilarious. Yeah. But actually, so we're talking about like specific books and like our kids and what they enjoy. We had a question that somebody who listens asked, which was, what do we think about mandatory reading time? Do we do it? Do we not do it? If we have, was it effective? Anybody have any feedback or thoughts about that?
We don't have mandatory reading time, except like we've created the routine of reading before bed. Mandatory is a harsher word than I would say, because, you know, sometimes we're rushing or whatever, and, you know, we don't have time to read, or whatever. But anyway, if we come home too late from something and we're rushing to bed, they are upset if there's not reading time, because we've built it into the routine and it's part of what they expect. But I like the idea, especially once my kids stopped napping, especially because I often had one that was napping or two that were napping and the other ones were not. And I was trying to make them be quiet. That I tried to enforce at least some quiet time that was a pile of books, even before they were like reading.
Mm-hmm.
If they would just look at pictures or whatever, because it was a quiet activity. But I wouldn't say mandatory. If they ever tell me they're bored, I'm like, here's the shelves.
Mhm.
There are a million here.
Yes. Yes. Ask your brother for a recommendation. Ask your sister if she has a book you can read, because now that they're on similar reading levels,
Right.
obviously, like, some of them are reading down, but they can all read the same types of things. I never want to hear I'm bored when we have a house full of unread books. That's my mandatory. If you're bored, you're mandatory. Go read.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you have to be careful about sort of mandatory, like, because then kids already associate books and school, and then it sort of, it creates that same kind of feeling at home. But if you have rules around, like, okay, it's bedtime, and you know, it's no screens now, but if you want to look at a book before you go to bed, then you can. And kids always want to stay up, so then it's like, well,
Right.
you know,
Okay,
it's like, but this is the only thing you're allowed to do if you're going to stay awake, and it won't usually keep them from necessarily from sleep if they're really tired. So,
right.
and it can sort of set up that activity, and as long as they have access to a bunch of books and whatever they like it don't try and give them like the good literature or the, you know, I mean, I got hooked on Sweet Valley Twins, you know, like, I mean, it's not,
Right.
It turned out okay.
it doesn't matter what it is. It can be the Minecraft books, the, you know, like whatever the TV things, whatever they attracts them, even if it's picture books, graphic novels, whatever it is, that if they get hooked on one, then they'll move into the others. But yeah, I think this sort of quiet time is kind of a useful way, and then it's sort of like, oh well, you get to stay up, but only if you do this, you know. That said, an alternative, someone told me about how they got their kids to read. They had a boat, but I think you could do this with camping quite just as well. It's like you go out, there's no technology. The only thing to do is read. So they go out on a boat for 3 weeks, and there was nothing else but books, books and the sea, and all of her children became readers because there was literally nothing to do. So if you were going to do mandatory reading time, I would make it almost like desert island, and all you have is books. You know? And then it's not, you know, it's not forced. It's like, no, it's you know, it's kind of forced proximity.
That's amazing.
Well, and so I guess this particular person said they've got two kids. One of them, it worked really well for them, and one of them it didn't. And I understand the like idea behind it, because like for if you're learning an instrument or whatever, that's like a very common thing to be like, you have to practice 15 minutes every day.
Yeah.
Like you have to read, you know, it's a skill, you want to develop it. You've decided it's an important thing, putting a time limit to it to make sure it's something that you do. But you know, he was saying that like one of his kids, like it did do the thing that they wanted it to do, and the other one, it left kind of a sour taste in their mouth, and maybe they weren't as interested in reading on their own. Something that we do with Clark is, so we read to him before bed, and then he has the ability, he can choose. He can either go to sleep right away, or he can read for another, like on his own independently, for another 15 minutes. Because I don't know if it was you, Megan, you were saying that like your son wanted to be read too, but he didn't like really love the idea of picking up the book himself. So we're just trying to like encourage that independent reader piece. And sometimes he chooses to go to bed and he falls asleep, and sometimes he chooses to read, and I'm trying not to push it. I feel like we talked about opportunity and like seeing books around, like we're setting the stage to let him know that like reading is cool. So I don't know.
Yeah, it can take some time, because like I said, I read to my son for like from when he was 18 months to when he was like 10 or 11. And I just kept reading things that were just a little bit ahead of him, because like they were ahead of his reading level, but they were right where his comprehension was. And then once we started getting into chapter books, and it's like, well, you only get one from me if you want to read yourself.
You're gonna
only do one. If you want to read more, then I mean, and that's where the carrot is, right? Like to really learn to read, because it's like, oh, if you want to finish Harry Potter tonight, you gotta.
That's right.
You gotta do it yourself.
Go ahead.
Well, and I think too, like I don't know, like I don't think like I think we sometimes undervalue even that reading to them. Like there's just something magical about having this story like read to you. I mean, Kimberly, you were talking about like, getting an audio like reader for your book, like for adults. Like we still want people to read stories to us. And so like I still read aloud to my kids, and my daughter's 15, you know, but you know what, now she's reading books aloud with her brothers. Like when my husband and I have to go run errands or we go on a date, like they've picked out a book from her library in her room, and she's working her way through reading aloud to all three of her brothers from her shelves. And it's like their fun treat thing for when mom and dad are out of the house. Like, you know, but I think like, I would definitely say too, like maybe you have a kid who's more auditory, and maybe you do still read with them. I think the other thing, we do a lot of the quiet time. My youngest son has major impulse control issues. And so we spend a lot of time being like, okay, you need to like take a calm down minute and like sit on the couch and just gather your thoughts.
Yeah.
And like almost every single time you can sit there with a book, or you can just sit there and calm down. And again, 9 times out of 10, he's going to say, I'm going to grab a book. And he's going to sit there and again, essentially just calm down and chill out and be ready to engage again with everybody else. But I mean, we do weird things too. We're nerdy. So we do like as a family in the evenings, we alternate between like my husband's reading The Hobbit to my kids, and about every other night we're doing crossword puzzles together as a family. And it's just developing kind of that love for words, and in a totally different way than reading a fiction novel or a nonfiction book. But just I feel like again, mandatory is hard, but I also think about like, I just think we're so unlimited in the ways that you can introduce like new ways to interact with the written word for your kids. Like, I think about when your kids are little and you like introduce foods and they're like, if they didn't like it, try a different way. And I feel like that's like introducing your kids or helping develop reading for them is a lot like that. Like if one thing isn't working, try a different thing. Like, cause there's just so many options out there and everybody's different. And so
I think that's why why reading to them works so well for for many parents, because they want your attention. They have that relationship with them, and then they start reading the words along while you read.
Yeah.
Just naturally. And then when they do start reading, they just take off. But like the worst punishment I could give to my son was, no story. If there is, like if you don't tidy up your room, then we won't have time for story. I never had to enforce it. It was such, it was such a strong, idea of punishment for him. So, I mean, if your kid, if your child is really doesn't want to read, then read to them instead. And then they'll develop that love of story. And once they have that, then they have the tools to seek it out for themselves later.
Yes. I've realized that sometimes my boys especially can't sit still. Like you picture this lovely, we're all on the couch together, being still and snuggling under a blanket. It's like sometimes my kids need to be playing with their Legos or doing a puzzle or whatever. It's like I like to listen to an audiobook while I do a puzzle.
Right.
Why would they not like me to tell them a story while they're doing a puzzle? Like something to keep their hands busy. Especially, I've got some neurodivergence scales with all of my kids. It's like, just because they need their hands busy on one thing doesn't mean their mind can't be taking in the other thing.
Yeah, I would say that too. Like, resist the urge to tell them not to fidget, because they might actually need my son. Yeah, is like that too. It used to drive me nuts, and I was like, all right, and then I learned about kinesthetic learners, and I thought, oh, he's not taking this in unless his hands are going. So, so try and resist. If they are a fidgeter, try and resist the urge. Tell them to stop.
They've got so many great toys now too that they really can just sit there with a little something. I'm like, I take them to Barnes and Noble sometimes. I try to shop at my indie, but Barnes and Noble has the toy aisle, and sometimes that's what they want as an incentive to go to the store with me. And that's what they want every time, is the little things that twist and turn and whatever that are like super portable. Like, okay, if that will make your brain like be able to, your listening ears are still on,
Which I never believed until I had a kid who did it.
Yes.
Who could just like seem like he was totally checked out and then repeat like verbatim everything I had just said. I was like, okay, well, that's a real thing.
Tell me wrong, okay.
Like small recording machines. Did you really remember that?
Yeah.
No, that's the thing you took away from all of that.
So I actually embrace the mandatory only because the school system that we've been a part of really has a good program, and they have goals and they have incentives for the kids. And we are just so busy with sports and activities that reading before bedtime has become mandatory. Like, it's a relaxing time. We kind of emphasize no screen, just detox your brain and just go read. But we do say, you have to meet your AR goal. You have to meet your AR goal. If you want to go to that skate party, you got to meet your AR goal. I'm a little nervous because she's transitioning out of elementary school into middle school, our youngest. So it'll be interesting to see. They aren't as strict on mandatory reading. They have a little bit more independence. So it'll be interesting to see if she continues. I mean, she goes upstairs and we give her from 8 to 9. It's your time, brush your teeth, you go pajamas, you read. So we'll see if there's not a goal involved. If she continues reading, she loves reading, but with the other two, it didn't really stick. And, I try to find things that they would want to read, even if it's not a book, like a comic book or a magazine or anything, just to keep them reading. But a lot of the times their minds are just so like distracted, So we do embrace hey, the school says you have to meet your AR goal. So you have to read. Otherwise, we're at soccer games or track and just running around like nuts.
So one of the last questions we're going to ask is like tips for fellow parents on raising readers. And mine, like I think I have some parent friends who would be like, yes, and some who would be like, ah. So I do not push reading at all, but my son plays Zelda. And in order to play Zelda, he has to be able to read the text. And we leave the captions on like television programs if he's watching them. And he goes, I sent you all a picture one day, like he goes on Spotify and he'll listen to a song and he'll like read the lyrics as he's listening to the song. And like really, I believe that any opportunity for reading is helpful. So even though I'm not like pushing him to like specifically read this exact book in this format or whatever, like he listens to audiobooks, but like anything he's reading, like it's a sign, it's like the front of a magazine. That is my strategy, and at the moment it is okay. So if you are feeling bad, any of you who are listening, that like your kid isn't sitting down with a book and like not ready to do that yet, like whatever, they're probably doing some reading when they're playing video games and stuff like that.
It's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how our daughter is. I don't push her. She loves to do it, but only when she really has to do it.
Mhm.
And then once she gets hooked in a story, she'll finish it. But yeah, I don't force her. She loves drawing. She's an artist. Both of the young girls are artists, and they love drawing and, learning how to expand that craft. But you find what they're good at and what they love, and then you find ways to incorporate reading into it.
I would say too, reading in front of them, like reading your own books in front of them. Like I think about like when I think about my grandma or like my mom specifically, like they enjoyed reading. And I like saw as a kid, I like observed them as adults reading for enjoyment. And it wasn't just like I had to read this for school or I had to read like whatever. Like it was like, okay, so that could be that could be a thing that I just do for fun. And then as I fell into those stories myself, and then as I became an adult, like again, you just carry that with you. And so again, I think it's not a like you have to do this way for like your kids sort of thing, but it's like again, I think we sometimes don't realize like again how much they're like watching and observing, and when they see you loving those things, then it's gonna like create some curiosity, and I think that can be a huge tool too.
Absolutely.
I think, especially if reading has become kind of a bone of contention between you, then seeing you model that behavior, then it becomes like, oh, it's not just something that I'm being made to do.
Right.
It's
She's
something.
enjoying that.
So read something really funny in front of your kids.
Yeah, there's been plenty
and
of nights where my daughter will join. She'll come and she'll see me reading and she'll be like, oh, let me go get my book, and we'll read together. Mm-hmm.
It's like side by side. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, my best two tips are, read to your kids.
Yes.
Read to them. And read things that you both enjoy, so it doesn't have to be painful. Like I did not read the painful books. I was no, we can't read that.
That fairy pony stage was the worst.
What?
The fairy ponies.
Oh,
When my daughter was like 6, I was just like, oh, I can't do it.
It's like, okay, you pick this one, but I get to pick the
Yes,
next.
that was exactly it. We'll read this next time.
And the other thing is let them, but simultaneously, like let them read what they want to read. So if that's the My Little Pony books, let them read the My Little Pony books.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's like, I agree with Megan where my daughter, for AR, she'd have a certain level she'd have to read, but she prefers to read Geronimo Stilton or something. And I'm like, well, that's not your AR level, but as long as you reach your 20-point goal, you can read as many Geronimo Stilton books as you want.
right.
How about you, Winnie? Do you have a hot tip?
I even asked I put it on my story today, and I was like, what are your tips for raising readers? And that's basically what they said. They said, let them see you read in front of them, read to them. let them pick what they're reading. That's been a big one that's been so helpful for me, because I'm like, oh, I loved this as a kid. Don't you want to read it? And they're like, that doesn't even sound interesting. And I'm like, cool. Thanks for making me feel great. But, letting them just read Dogman 80 times
Right.
is sometimes just, it's better than not reading. So that's what they do. But the last thing was the limit that screen time, which I feel like people have said it. We know it.
Yeah.
And ask me in July at the end of the month when there's only like 3 weeks left until school if I'm limiting my screen time, and I will probably say no. But especially in the school year when we have a routine, the routine is going to be very little. And,
Yeah. And if you do use screen time, leave the captions on the shows.
That I've never thought about that, and I will be doing that.
Love it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I had one other one that I was thinking of, and this is probably best if your kids are younger. It would be harder to introduce to kids who are maybe not readers later on. But we give a book, like when we do Christmas every year, one of their gifts is something to read.
Yes, same.
And so it's like, it's an anticipation thing. Like this is something we look forward to, not like, oh, I got socks and a book. Like, but it's, like, so we get them things that they're interested in, like series or authors that we know they're going to love. But they get a new one every Christmas. And then it'd be like, again, it builds that. It's another way just to build that anticipation. Like this is a treat, not a discipline or like a school educational like thing that I'm being forced on. So I like, again, just a way to kind of like, again, work that mindset and that just that positive association, I feel like, for kids.
That's a good. Oh, go ahead, Whitney.
Oh, I was just going to say, we use the whole Christmas season too as like a read together, because in the fall it's really busy and you like want to be able to keep up with that, but we have so many like loved by the whole family like Christmas picture books, and then you've only had to sit down for 10 minutes if you want to read the picture book together. It goes fast. Anybody in the family can read it at my house now. Like Joseph can read it, Davis can read it, whatever, but like it kind of builds it back in, and sometimes it'll carry through past that to be like, oh, it's Christmas, let's read Christmas books. Like sometimes something like that to like pull you out of your rut. You know what I mean?
We've done birthday parties where I got Room on the Broom for each of the kids.
Yes.
And they would sit there and they'd watch the Room on the Broom and read along.
Oh, that's so fun.
And then they got to take the book home. The girls love that one.
That's awesome.
We love Room on the Broom.
I was gonna say, so my birthday's in January. It's like right after Christmas, and so then I'd get like Christmas birthday, nothing. So my mom started this tradition at I don't remember when, but like she would get me a book for my half birthday.
Oh, fun.
And that was always like this thing that I looked forward to, because it was, it was like a little something, be like, hey, I understand that like we just double up your stuff in the winter. But it was a book.
That needs to be a trend. You need to start that on a trend, half birthday book.
Yes, for sure. It's like what's Neil Gaiman do? All Hallows Read. Like you get
I love that.
Yeah. Half birthday books.
Half birthday books.
I love that. My middle son and I are both December birthdays, so we have the flip side. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I think that was hopefully everyone's got like some good tips if they've been wondering how to raise readers. And to everyone listening, we would love to hear from you. What, if anything, are you doing to raise readers? Leave your comments below or get in touch with us on Instagram. That's where I think most of us kind of hang out. Our next episode, we'll be talking about book formats. So are you a paperback lover? Do you read ebooks, hardcover, audiobooks? We'll be discussing pros and cons of each of them just in time for your summer vacations. And but that's all from us today. I'm Amy from the Pens and the Bookmarks, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.